Hi there. Today I want to take a look at a sweet wine from sherry. So this is an Oloroso sherry, but a sweetened Oloroso sherry, or what in the UK would be called a cream sherry. This is Lustau's East India Solera, and it's a wine made in the style of wines that have been, in the 17th century, were produced and were shipped in sailing vessels to the other side of the world. So there's a likelihood that the ship would have been becalmed in the tropics, so it would have had aging once it had been put into barrel for shipping under warm conditions. So they're trying to mimic those conditions, because that helps marry the components of the wine. So just a quick recap of Lustau. Historic house, started as an almacenista, so a storehouse, and they actually had some of their own vineyards. In 1896 by José Ruiz-Berdejo. Wasn't really until the 1950s that they started to expand and bottle their own wines and ship them under the guidance of then Emilio Lustau Ortega, who I think was his great-grandson or some relative along those lines. So this wine is a blend of 80% of dry Palomino-based Oloroso, so a wine that spent 12 years in a Solera, aging with oxidation, continually on a regular basis, not as frequently as a Fino sherry, but regularly being topped with new wine. So you have a combination of older wine and younger, fresher wine, continually being turned over through that 12-year period. And the balancing 20% is made from a grape variety called Pedro Jimenez. Pedro Jimenez makes incredibly sweet wines. So again, aging for 12 years in a Solera. These are grapes that will have been dried, that have been raisined, so they're making a tiny amount of very concentrated, very sweet wine during that process. The two are blended together, and once they're blended together, they'll age for another 3 years in a Solera of 45 barrels. So they're making this in fair quantities. So that Solera will, again, be refreshed from the two Soleras in the blend on a regular basis as well. So the Solera will continue there to have younger wine being added to it, as well as the older, nuttier wines. The wine, as you can see, sort of gains a darker colour during that oxidative process. So 15 years aging is the idea. And I would assume, although the notes don't actually say, that for the later 3-year period, there's a certain amount of heat that the Solera is exposed to give some rancio character to the wine that would mimic the result of having been shipped in a sailing ship. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? First thing to say, the colour has the notes say mahogany, but I'd almost sort of say there's a sort of a red amber note there. There really is a richness to the colour there. I mean, there's no red grape varieties in it, so there wouldn't be red pigmentation. But as I swirl, strangely, the meniscus is actually looking much more tawny, much more nutty brown. The alcohol on this is 20%, relatively high for a sherry, so it's unsurprising that with that level of alcohol and also with, I believe, 134 grams per litre of sugar, that this is sort of sticking to the glass fairly, as fairly heavy tears running down there. So let's look at the aromas, shall we? Those aromas, very, very complex. You've got underlying notes of rich fruit. There's sort of dried fig, dried sultana, there's treacle, there's caramel. There's an almost sort of slightly meaty, almost a touch of Vegemite savouriness to it that I think is also allied to woody notes in there. Not necessarily nutty notes, but much, much more woody notes. And then again, you've got some lifted notes that are almost sort of dried orange peel, dried lemon peel, those sort of dried peel notes that would suggest some sort of that sort of rancio aging with a little bit of warmth. So let's taste, shall we? A sweet wine, but strangely with really good freshness. There's a lifted note. There's probably a certain element of volatile acidity, because there's a real sort of high tone note. There's some drying, savoury and woody notes underlying sort of rich top notes of raisin, sultana, it is that dried fig, but behind that sort of slightly dusty, slightly woody, slightly drying oak, and then sort of there are notes of orange peel. I mean, one of the serving suggestions I've seen with this is served lightly chilled with a slice of orange in it, and I could see that that would complement these flavours really well. The finish, actually, for a wine that's this sweet, doesn't finish particularly sweet. There's that sort of drying, slightly savoury note, and the slight rancio notes as well are showing on the finish. In fact, they're opening on the finish quite nicely, giving it some length. The alcohol, it's not really showing that it's 20%. I mean, there is some warmth there, but it's not sort of blasting out. There's sufficient richness there that it's not being overpowered by the alcohol in that. So I think that's a really interesting wine. The sweet style of Oloroso, not necessarily to everybody's taste, but a wine that would could be used in a number of situations. I mean, certainly with soft cheeses and that sort of thing would go beautifully. I've seen the suggestion of foie gras, but not everybody likes foie gras. But actually, the sort of the lifted, slight dancing volatility of this would work quite nicely with those sort of rich notes. But however you drink it, certainly well worth trying a cream sherry of this quality, because for the quality you're getting, the price is not particularly high, and there's it's real interest in a glass. The flavours are still dancing on my tongue. I'm still finding additional sort of caramelised notes at the back there that are fascinating. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you find this interesting. I hope you'll like and share the video, and I hope you'll join us again soon. Bye now.